The silent signals of Blackwater Cove. There are places along the American coastline where the fog does more than obscure the view. It absorbs sound, it distorts distance, it makes familiar landmarks feel misplaced, and sometimes, according to those who live there, it carries something else. Between 1948 and 1963, along a quiet stretch of shoreline known locally as Blackwater Cove, fishermen, lighthouse keepers, and passing sailors began reporting the same strange detail. Not storms, not wreckage, not smugglers. Signals. Lights beneath the water where no vessel moved. Low-frequency tones that seemed to vibrate through bone. Radios that crackled to life without transmission. Individually, each account was explainable. Together, they formed a pattern. This is not the story of a single night. It is the story of repetition. And repetition is harder to dismiss. The geography of silence. Blackwater Cove does not appear on most modern maps. Located along a sparsely developed section of the northeastern American coastline, the cove rests between two granite headlands that curve inward like cupped hands. In the mid-20th century, it was little more than a working inlet, a wooden pier, a bait shack, a modest lighthouse, and a dirt road that connected the fishing village to the nearest highway, nearly 12 miles inland. The water there is unusually dark. Not polluted, not stagnant, simply dark. Oceanographers later attributed the coloration to depth and the angle of the continental shelf. The seabed drops sharply just beyond the breakwater, creating a sudden trench that swallows light even on clear afternoons. But locals rarely discussed the science. They discussed the quiet. Even during the busiest hours of the fishing season, there was a noticeable absence of echo. Fog rolled in frequently, especially late summer and early fall. It muted gull calls. It flattened wave sound. Conversations carried strangely, as if spoken through cloth. Old-timers said the cove kept its own weather. That phrase would resurface often. The first recorded account, autumn 1948. The earliest written reference to unusual activity at Blackwater Cove comes from a personal journal belonging to Thomas Hale, a commercial fisherman who operated a 32-foot wooden trawler named Maribel. Hale was not prone to exaggeration. Born in 1915, he had served in the Pacific during the Second World War. Shipmates later described him as steady, a man not easily shaken by rough water or mechanical failure. After returning home, he resumed fishing full-time. On October 17, 1948, Hale wrote a brief but peculiar entry. Fog heavy tonight. No moon. Around 2:10 in the morning, saw steady white glow below port side. Not reflection, too deep. Engine cut for drift. Light remained. No sound except hum felt through deck boards. Duration, maybe 3 minutes. Faded downward. He did not report the event to authorities. He did not mention it in the bait shack the following morning. The entry remained private until after his death in 1972, when his daughter donated his journals to a regional maritime archive. At the time, it was considered an odd but isolated anecdote. Only later would it be revisited. The Lighthouse Keeper. In 1951, responsibility for the Blackwater Lighthouse fell to a man named Edwin Mercer. Mercer was meticulous. His logbooks were precise to the minute. Weather conditions, boat maintenance schedules, passing vessels, everything recorded in consistent handwriting. Beginning in late November of that year, subtle notations began appearing in the margins. November 28, 1951. Visibility low.
Sound anomaly at approximately 1:43. Low sustained tone. Duration 30 seconds. No visible vessel. December 3rd, 1951. Fog dense. Tone again. Slightly higher frequency. Structure vibrated lightly. December 19th, 1951. Radio interference during tone. Static fluctuations. The tone was never described as loud. It was described as pervasive. Mercer did file a brief inquiry with the Coast Guard, suggesting the possibility of submarine activity. The Korean War had raised awareness of naval movement, and such a theory was not implausible. An investigation was conducted. No scheduled submarine exercises occurred within documented range. Mercer's reports were archived and quietly closed, but the entries did not stop. Shared experience. The first corroborated multi-witness account occurred in July 1953. 3 teenage boys, sons of local fishermen, had taken a small skiff out beyond the breakwater just before dusk. According to later interviews conducted decades afterwards, they were approximately half a mile offshore when the water lit from below. Not a flash, not a beam, a diffuse glow, pale and steady, expanding outward beneath the hull. One of the boys, interviewed in 1994 at the age of 56, recalled, "It wasn't like lightning. It didn't scare us at first. It was almost beautiful, like someone turned on a lamp under the ocean." The glow persisted for perhaps 90 seconds. Then came the vibration. Not strong enough to capsize the skiff, not even strong enough to disturb the surface significantly, but noticeable, felt through the wooden slats. The boys returned to shore shaken but not panicked. What altered the tone of the story was timing. The lighthouse log that same evening recorded unusual luminescence offshore at 19:22, confirmed visually. For the first time, 2 independent sources aligned. The radio incident, 1956. By the mid-1950s, radio equipment had become common among local vessels. On April 14, 1956, Captain Roland Pierce was navigating back toward Blackwater Cove after an overnight catch. Weather conditions were clear. The sea was calm. At approximately 3:17 in the morning, his radio activated without manual input. According to Pierce's later statement, the speaker emitted what he initially assumed was distant static, but beneath the static was rhythm. Not speech, not Morse code, a patterned pulsing tone. Pierce attempted to adjust frequency bands. The signal did not shift. After approximately 40 seconds, the sound ceased abruptly. Simultaneously, a crew member reported seeing something pale moving below starboard. Pierce, a pragmatic man with no public interest in speculation, dismissed the event as equipment malfunction. 2 weeks later, the vessel's radio was inspected. No defect was found. Pattern recognition. By 1958, at least 9 separate accounts existed involving subsurface illumination, low-frequency tonal vibrations, radio interference, fog density coinciding with activity. Yet none of these incidents caused damage. No boats were lost, no injuries were reported, no structures were compromised. This absence of harm complicated classification. If it had been sabotage, it was ineffective. If it had been natural, it was irregular. If it had been military, it was undocumented. The town itself began to divide quietly. Some residents refused to discuss it. Others leaned into the mystery, referring casually to the Watchers. The term appeared first in a 1959 local newspaper opinion column. Whatever rests below that trench, it seems content to observe rather than interfere. The article was brief, The editor declined follow-up. The final major incident, winter 1963. A most detailed event occurred on January 11, 1963. A winter storm had passed earlier in the week, leaving frigid air and lingering fog. At 2:06 in the morning, lighthouse keeper Mercer, now nearing retirement, recorded his final unusual entry. Strongest tone to date. Entire structure vibrated. Light below surface sustained approximately 4 minutes. Color slightly bluish. No vessel on radar. Simultaneously, 2 trawlers docked in the harbor reported identical sensations. One fisherman later stated, "It felt like the ocean was breathing." The glow faded. The tone stopped. And after that night, reports diminished dramatically. Mercer retired in March. Within 2 years, the lighthouse was automated. The fishing industry gradually declined as larger commercial operations shifted offshore. Blackwater Cove grew quieter. What remains? In the decades since, researchers have proposed explanations. Bioluminescent plankton blooms, underwater seismic activity, experimental naval sonar, acoustic resonance in the trench. Each theory accounts for part of the pattern. None accounts for all of it, especially the radio phenomenon, especially the consistent tonal frequency described across 15 years. Most compelling of all is the restraint. The lights did not approach shore, the tones did not escalate, the interference did not repeat aggressively. It was as if whatever occurred operated within limits, observed, then withdrew. The psychological component. Skeptics argue that once a location gains a reputation, perception shifts. Fog becomes heavier, shadows become intentional, ordinary marine sounds become coded. And it is true that suggestion shapes memory. But early entries, Hale's journal, Mercer's logs, predate public discussion. The pattern began quietly, without audience, without narrative. That is harder to explain. The present day. Today, Blackwater Cove remains sparsely visited. The pier has been replaced. The bait shack is gone. The lighthouse operates remotely. Tourists occasionally stop for photographs, unaware of archived logbooks and aging fishermen who still avoid late-night departures when fog settles too quickly. No major incident has been recorded in over 50 years. But local boaters sometimes report brief radio distortion during heavy mist. They rarely file paperwork. They rarely linger offshore. Because whether natural or not, the memory persists, and repetition, once established, does not require constant renewal. Sometimes it only requires waiting.
Beneath the shelf. The winter following the January 1963 incident did not bring clarity. It brought absence. For nearly 3 months after the strongest recorded tonal event at Blackwater Cove, there were no further reports, no unusual radio interference, no subsurface illumination, no vibration felt through dock planks or hull beams. The ocean returned to behaving as oceans traditionally do, unpredictable in weather, but ordinary in explanation. To some residents, that was confirmation that the earlier events had been seasonal or environmental, a convergence of fog density, underwater acoustics, and heightened post-war imagination. To others, the silence felt deliberate. Patterns, after all, do not require constant repetition. They require recurrence, and recurrence often follows a pause. Edwin Mercer's retirement. When Edwin Mercer officially retired from his position as lighthouse keeper in March of 1963, he left behind 32 years of carefully maintained logs.
His final months at the lighthouse had been marked by increasing automation initiatives along the American coastline. Manual oversight was slowly being replaced by remote monitoring. Mercer did not object publicly, but in private correspondence with a former colleague stationed along the Maine coast, he expressed concern not about employment, but about attention. In a letter dated April 2, 1963, Mercer wrote, "When a man lives inside a tower long enough, he begins to understand its temperament. There are fluctuations that machinery will not interpret. A device records light output. It does not record resonance." The word resonance appeared again in the margins of his final logbook, not underlined, not emphasized, simply present. After retirement, Mercer remained in the village for 2 more years before relocating inland to live with his sister. He rarely discussed Blackwater Cove. When asked directly about the January incident, he would reportedly pause before responding, "It was consistent." He never elaborated. A quiet investigation. In late 1964, an oceanographic survey vessel from a northeastern university conducted a routine seabed mapping project several miles offshore from Blackwater Cove. The expedition was not directly connected to prior reports. Its purpose was academic, sediment analysis, and depth verification. However, during one of the final sonar sweeps along the outer edge of the continental shelf, the crew documented an irregularity. Not a structure, not debris, a depression. Approximately 280 feet below the surface and extending outward along the trench wall was an unusually smooth, concave region inconsistent with surrounding rock formations. Initial speculation attributed the shape to historical underwater landslide activity. Yet, when compared with earlier hydrographic data, the contour appeared more defined than expected. The survey team did not publish the anomaly as extraordinary. It was mentioned briefly in an appendix, categorized as geological variance. No further study was commissioned. The finding would remain buried in academic archives for decades. The Return of the Tone, 1965. 2 years passed without documented incident. Then, on September 8, 1965, a shrimp trawler named Caroline M. reported a familiar sensation. The vessel's captain, Samuel Driscoll, described it not as a sound, but as pressure. At approximately 1:14 in the morning, while navigating parallel to the trench boundary, Driscoll felt a low vibration beneath his boots. Crew members described a simultaneous tightening in the air, an oppressive stillness despite moderate wind conditions. No visible light accompanied the event. No radio interference was recorded. The vibration lasted roughly 45 seconds before dissipating. Driscoll, who had not been present for the earlier 1950s incidents, initially assumed mechanical malfunction. Inspection revealed none. When he later mentioned the event at the harbor, 2 older fishermen exchanged glances but offered no immediate commentary. The pattern had not vanished. It had altered. Collective memory. By the mid-1960s, younger residents of the village had grown up hearing fragments of the lights below stories. They were recounted casually, often as local color rather than credible concern. But among those who had witnessed the events firsthand, the memory retained specificity, not fear, precision. Descriptions of the tone remained remarkably consistent across decades. Low frequency, sustained, non-pulsing, felt more than heard. In psychological studies, memory distortion often amplifies dramatic detail, yet here accounts remained restrained. No one described rapid movement. No one claimed direct contact. No one reported voices or communication. Only observation. Only presence.
As reports resurfaced intermittently during the late 1960s, speculation shifted toward military explanation. The Cold War had intensified underwater surveillance technology development. Sonar experimentation was widely known, though details remained classified. Several residents informally contacted a regional naval office to inquire whether training exercises had occurred offshore. Official response indicated no scheduled operations within reported proximity. However, such statements, while technically accurate, did little to extinguish suspicion. The trench beyond Blackwater Cove remained strategically unremarkable, too shallow for deep ocean testing, too narrow for large-scale maneuvering. If naval activity had been responsible, it would have been inefficiently placed. Furthermore, the earliest documented events predated major Cold War sonar expansions. The timeline did not align cleanly. Environmental hypotheses. Marine biologists later proposed bioluminescent plankton blooms as a plausible source of subsurface illumination. Certain microorganisms emit light when disturbed, particularly in nutrient-rich waters. Yet several discrepancies persisted. The reported glow beneath vessels was steady, not reactive to agitation. It often originated at depth rather than surface disturbance. It was described as white or pale blue, not the typical shimmering turquoise associated with plankton activity. Similarly, underwater seismic microtremors could account for vibrational sensation. The northeastern coastline sits near minor fault lines, capable of low-intensity activity. But seismic events generally register on monitoring equipment. No corresponding records were found for the January 1963 incident, and none of these explanations addressed radio interference. The absence of escalation. One of the most puzzling characteristics of the Blackwater Cove phenomena was its restraint. Across nearly 2 decades, no vessel capsized, no nets were torn by unseen force, no injuries occurred, no direct approach to shore was documented. If the source had been biological, it displayed no aggression. If mechanical, it demonstrated no expansion. If intelligent, it exhibited no communication attempt. It remained peripheral, consistent in behavior, contained within geographic boundary. This containment would later become a focal point of independent research. A private recording. In 1968, a high school science teacher named Harold Bennett attempted a modest experiment. Armed with a portable reel-to-reel audio recorder, Bennett positioned himself at the far end of the pier during a fog-heavy evening in late October. His objective was simple: capture ambient coastal sound for classroom instruction. At 11:42 in the evening, according to the timestamp he logged, the recorder registered an anomaly. The tape, preserved and digitized in 2003, reveals approximately 18 seconds of low-frequency tone beneath wind and water noise. Audio analysts later confirmed the sound was not mechanical feedback from the recorder itself. The frequency remained stable and unmodulated. No further tones were captured that evening. Bennett did not publish his finding. He stored the tape in a labeled envelope, Cove Sound, October. It would not resurface publicly until decades later. Diminishing industry. By the early 1970s, the fishing industry at Blackwater Cove had declined significantly. Larger commercial fleets operated farther offshore, rendering small local trawlers economically strained. With fewer vessels departing nightly, opportunities for direct observation decreased. Silence once again blurred interpretation. Was the phenomenon ending, or was it simply unobserved? The modern question.
Today, historians and researchers examining the Blackwater Cove archive face a familiar challenge. The documentation is incomplete. The events are consistent but sparse. The evidence is atmospheric rather than material. No fragments were recovered. No sonar images preserved definitive structure. No photographs captured illumination beneath the surface. What remains are logbooks, journals, testimony transcripts, and a single reel-to-reel recording containing 18 seconds of tone. For skeptics, the explanation remains environmental coincidence amplified by narrative. For others, the geographic boundary, the trench, continues to invite speculation. If the source of the signals lay beneath that shelf, its behavior suggests surveillance rather than intrusion, and surveillance implies awareness. The ocean, vast and indifferent in scale, often reminds humanity of its limits. Blackwater Cove offers a subtler reminder, not that something emerged, but that something remained.
The unseen current. The autumn of 1967 arrived with the usual chill and fog settling over Blackwater Cove. Local fishermen had grown accustomed to the seasons, to the changing tides, and to the quiet hum of the offshore currents. Yet even as patterns of labor and trade continued, something subtle began to emerge, a rhythm in the observations that had long eluded easy explanation. This episode, while lacking the dramatic flair of the 1963 or 1965 events, revealed a crucial pattern, subtle recurrence. The early observers. 3 small trawlers departed in the pre-dawn fog on October 12, 1967. They were routine trips, shrimping, lobster pots, and cod nets, nothing unusual by local standards. Thomas Hale, now approaching his mid-40s, had reduced his own fishing nights to a handful of trips per month. His familiarity with the ocean lent him an uncanny calm, though his gaze often lingered over dark water longer than others. Roland Pierce, steady as ever, continued his nightly runs, carefully noting every anomaly in his captain's journal. Samuel Driscoll, still active, had begun collaborating with local researchers, offering his observations for academic purposes. While none anticipated anything extraordinary, the ocean had a way of reminding the village that presence is often unnoticed until recorded. Subtle disturbances. At precisely 2:07 a.m., as the 3 vessels navigated parallel courses along the continental shelf, small, almost imperceptible disturbances were noted. Thomas Hale felt vibrations through the deck, not the steady low tone of the past incidents, but a rapid, subtle pulse. On Roland Pierce's trawler, water in the buckets sloshed gently without wind or motion from the crew. Samuel Driscoll noted faint interference on his new portable radio scanner. Nothing audible, just a subtle static fluctuation. Individually, none of these could have warranted alarm. Collectively, they suggested that the phenomenon had not disappeared, it had simply adapted. Observation logs. For the first time, multiple first-hand logs existed that could be cross-referenced. Each observer described the event with remarkable consistency. Pulses felt through deck or hull, duration 20 to 35 seconds, no visual anomalies, subtle electrical interference on radios or small instruments. The coordination of these observations suggested a phenomenon that was not entirely random. Something or someone was tracking vessels, or at least responding to their movement. The academic inquiry. By late 1967, coastal researchers began to formally collect and analyze reports. Small surveys were conducted. Environmental conditions logged, water temperature, salinity, tide charts, wind speeds and directions monitored.
underwater sonar scans performed along the continental shelf. Findings were inconclusive, yet the rigor of data collection marked a shift in understanding. Observation mattered. Patterns only revealed themselves when measured systematically. The fisherman's perspective. Despite the increasing academic presence, the fishermen remained wary. They described an awareness beyond rational explanation, a pressure beneath the hull when the pulse occurred. The sensation was distinct from sea swell. Subtle anxiety crept into otherwise routine trips, not fear of harm, but the awareness of being watched. In interviews conducted decades later, many described this as respectful presence, a reminder of limits rather than threat. Roland Pierce's journal. Roland Pierce's meticulous notes from October 12th through 13th, 1967 provide insight into the emerging understanding. 3 vessels tonight, each experienced pulses, duration short but distinct, no visual phenomena, radio scanner intermittent, atmospheric conditions stable, ocean calm. Vibration is real, yet neither destructive nor loud. Something observes without aggression. Pierce concluded that the phenomenon exhibited behavioral restraint, a factor that would perplex scientists and historians alike. The technological lens. Meanwhile, technological advancements offered new investigative tools. Portable hydrophones captured low-frequency pulses below human hearing thresholds. Sonar mapping recorded subtle water column disturbances, though no structure could be identified. Early magnetic detectors suggested minor electromagnetic fluctuations during each pulse event. Although these instruments could detect something, they could not explain why or what was causing it. Cross-referencing the timeline. Analysis of past reports, 1950s to mid-1960s, revealed a temporal pattern. Strongest events occurred during late winter or early spring, January through March. Subtle pulses, like those in 1967, clustered in autumn months, September through October. Intervening months often lacked detectable anomalies. This suggested that environmental factors may influence visibility or intensity, but not causation. The phenomenon appeared persistent, cyclical, and restrained. Hypotheses. By late 1968, 3 primary hypotheses had emerged among researchers. Biological source, unlikely due to depth, steadiness of pulses, and lack of visual evidence. Geological activity, small-scale tectonic microtremors or gas releases, but correlation with time of year inconsistent. Intelligent observation, speculative given coordinated response to vessels without aggressive or intrusive behavior. No single theory fully accounted for all observations. The persistent mystery. Blackwater Cove ends with reflection rather than resolution. Blackwater remains an intersection of human observation, environmental factors, and unexplained anomalies. What is clear, the pulses are persistent yet measured, a reminder that the ocean is a space where presence does not always equate to threat, and observation itself is a form of interaction. The cove, the shelf, the fog, they hold history in silence, measured by logs, journals, and subtle vibrations beneath the hull. And as the decades progress, the pattern endures. The sea does not forget.
Echoes below. By the early 1970s, Blackwater Cove had shifted from a bustling small fishing hub to a quieter, almost forgotten coastal town. The larger commercial fleets operated farther offshore, and local captains reduced their trips. This decrease in maritime activity coincided with an odd consistency. The phenomenon did not vanish, but it became quieter, subtler, almost patient. The observers now were fewer but more meticulous. Those who continued logging their observations noticed a recurring pattern in timing and intensity, suggesting that the source was not random but methodical. 1. A changing coastline. The shoreline itself was beginning to change. Development had slowed, leaving patches of abandoned piers and rotting wooden docks. Erosion, wind, and sea spray altered the familiar landmarks that generations had relied upon. Residents like Thomas Hale noted that the cove felt different, not in any overt way, but in the way the fog lingered longer in some spots, and the water moved oddly near certain trenches. These were subtle sensations, fleetingly noticed and easy to dismiss, but not for those attuned to the cove's rhythms. 2. New observers arrive. A small team of oceanographers from a nearby university began studying the cove in 1971. Their focus, low-frequency vibrations and subtle anomalies in water movement. They were armed with early hydrophones, portable sonar, and logbooks to document each trip. Dr. Eleanor James, oceanographer, mid-30s, intelligent and meticulous, with soft, authoritative tone, short brown hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, windbreaker and waterproof trousers, carrying notebooks and early portable recording devices. Michael Thompson, research assistant, mid-20s, lanky, with close-cropped black hair, serious and detail-oriented, operating sonar devices and logging data. Their presence marked a shift from anecdotal observation to empirical investigation. 3. Early measurements. On their first night at the cove, the team recorded subtle vibrations along the dock pilings that matched historical descriptions. The instruments indicated low-frequency pulses lasting roughly 15 to 30 seconds. No visual cues accompanied the pulses. Dr. James noted, "It's almost as if something beneath the shelf is testing awareness, not aggression. There's intention in these pulses, but no approach." This observation echoed prior fishermen's interpretations from decades earlier. The phenomenon appeared curiously restrained. 4. Tracing the pattern. Cross-referencing logs from the 1950s through 1971, a timeline emerged. Stronger incidents clustered in winter and early spring. Subtle pulses appeared in late summer and autumn. Intensity correlated weakly with tidal patterns, but inconsistently. Dr. James suggested that the source may respond to human activity as occurrences aligned more closely with vessel presence than natural cycles. 5. Subsurface exploration. In March 1972, the team deployed small sonar arrays along the continental trench. The sonar revealed disturbances in water density and pressure. There were no solid structures, but the ocean column displayed anomalies consistent with objects or energy fields moving slowly beneath the surface. Michael Thompson documented, "We see movement where there should be none. Nothing physical rises to the top. It's like a shadow in water." These results deepened the mystery. 6. The human element. Residents continued to report sensations during nighttime fishing trips, subtle vibration beneath feet, mild pressure in cabins, electrical interference with radios and navigational tools. Yet none reported harm. The phenomenon remained non-intrusive. Observers described a quiet presence, almost like a guardian of the trench, responding but not interfering. 7. Technology versus history.
By 1973, technological capabilities had improved slightly. Hydrophones were sensitive enough to record pulses too low for human hearing. Early magnetic detectors captured minor fluctuations aligned with pulses. Instruments confirmed that each pulse originated from the trench beyond the shelf. Despite these advances, the cause remained elusive. Researchers could measure the effects but could not explain the origin. 8. A notable observation. April 1973. One evening in April, Dr. James and her team noted a pulse that differed slightly from prior ones. Duration, 45 seconds. Slightly higher frequency component detectable. Mild shimmer on water surface, pale bluish hue, almost imperceptible. The phenomenon, while still restrained, demonstrated variability. It adapted. Dr. James remarked, "It's almost as if it can modulate its presence. We are being observed, not interacted with." 9. Local memory versus empirical data. Older fishermen shared stories aligning with these subtle shifts. They remembered how the ocean felt alive on certain nights. Seasonal changes and fog patterns influenced perception of the pulses. Instruments confirmed what intuition had long suggested. The phenomenon was persistent, silent, and selective. The combination of human experience and empirical measurement provided the most holistic view yet. 10. Reflections on the shelf. By the end of episode 4, a key understanding emerged. The trench beyond Blackwater Cove was a persistent source of subtle pulses. The phenomenon displayed selective awareness, choosing when and how to manifest. Despite decades of observation, no material evidence had been recovered. Observers left with a mixture of awe and unease. The ocean, though familiar and studied, had revealed a layer of reality that eluded conventional explanation. Blackwater Cove remained a silent witness. Its waters whispered history through vibration, memory, and the measured pulse of something unseen beneath the shelf.
The hidden currents. By the mid-1970s, Blackwater Cove had become a quiet observatory for those who studied both human and oceanic behavior. The vessels had grown fewer and the shoreline more desolate, yet the phenomenon persisted, persistent, subtle, and patient. The observers who remained noticed something different. The pulses were no longer merely occasional. They displayed temporal and spatial awareness, almost as if reacting to human presence. Thomas Hale, now nearing 50, had reduced his trips to a minimum, yet each voyage he undertook seemed to synchronize with subtle underwater activity. Even in near-total silence, he felt the deck beneath him respond to a rhythm not generated by engines or waves. He described it as a heartbeat of the cove beneath the shelf, quiet but insistent. Fellow fishermen began documenting their experiences in private journals, noting that the pulses now varied in intensity, duration, and subtle frequency. Dr. Eleanor James returned in 1974, accompanied by an expanded team. Michael Thompson, still her assistant, now experienced and confident in data collection. Linda Cortez, oceanographer and acoustic specialist, mid-30s, focused, analytical, with keen eyes and dark hair tucked into a practical cap. Their mission was ambitious: record every detectable pulse, map it, and analyze correlations with human activity and environmental conditions. During a night on the trench, the team deployed hydrophones along the continental shelf. The observations were subtle. Vibrations in water detectable on instruments lasting 20 to 40 seconds. Slight electromagnetic fluctuations detected by field meters. No visual phenomenon observed,
but the sound waves suggested a directed source. Linda Cortez remarked, "It's aware. The pulses change when we adjust equipment or move closer. We are part of the experiment, whether we want to be or not." The team cross-referenced data with fishermen's logs spanning 20 years. They discovered intensity peaks during specific seasonal windows, late winter, early spring. Subtle pulses in autumn months were consistently present but less intense. Duration of pulses appeared longer when vessels were closer to the trench edge. This reinforced the idea that the phenomenon was not random but responsive. During one observation session, a vessel anchored near the shelf detected something new. A low hum resonated beneath the hull for nearly a minute. Instruments captured faint harmonic frequencies, uncharacteristic of natural or mechanical sources. Slight luminescence observed in the water, bluish-green and fleeting. Although subtle, this confirmed that the phenomenon could interact with the environment in unexpected ways. Older captains shared that the pulses had always been there, but the cove seemed to respond differently depending on human behavior. A boat idling silently near the trench would sometimes trigger multiple consecutive pulses. Movement away from the trench reduced the frequency. Electrical interference on radios coincided with observed pulses. Thomas Hale summarized, "It's not malicious, it watches, it measures, but it is alive in its own way." By 1975, the academic debate had intensified. Subsurface geological theory, minor tectonic or sediment shifts explain some effects, but not harmonic pulses or reactive behavior. Biological source, large unknown marine species hypothesized, yet no visual confirmation exists. Intelligent observation suggests a sentient or semi-sentient presence capable of measuring human proximity without interaction. Consensus remained elusive. Linda Cortez implemented early acoustic triangulation. Placing 3 hydrophones along the trench allowed directionality estimation. Repeated measurements suggested the pulses originated from varying points along the shelf, moving slowly and deliberately. The pattern resembled a patrol or deliberate scanning behavior. This reinforced the growing sense of intelligence behind the anomaly, though the exact nature remained unknown. Despite scientific detachment, the observers could not ignore the emotional weight. Fishermen felt awe and subtle unease. Researchers noted presence in journals, descriptions of something watching without threat. Observations suggested the phenomenon respected human boundaries, a rare quality in nature. Thomas Hale reflected, "It reminds us that the ocean is bigger than we can imagine, and sometimes we are the intruders." Episode 5 concludes with a meditation on observation and patience. The Blackwater Cove phenomenon had endured decades, persistent yet restrained. Observers had learned to read subtle rhythms of the ocean, blending intuition with measurement. Despite decades of technological progress, the true nature of the pulses remained elusive. Blackwater Cove was a laboratory without walls, where history, memory, and mystery coexisted quietly beneath the surface, waiting to be understood but never fully revealed. The ocean had its rhythm, and humans were merely participants in its silent choreography.
The silent currents. By the late 1970s, Blackwater Cove had become a place where few ventured without careful preparation. The ocean here was no longer merely a livelihood. It was a laboratory, a theater, and a puzzle. Observers noted that the phenomenon seemed to have developed a patterned awareness, almost as if it could anticipate human movement along the shelf. 1. Quiet shorelines. The piers, once bustling with small trawlers, were mostly empty. Decaying planks, salt-worn posts, and faint echoes of past activity created an air of stillness.
Thomas Hale, now in his early 50s, often walked the shoreline alone before embarking on trips, feeling the subtle rhythm beneath his feet, a vibration he had learned to sense even without instruments. 2. The research team returns. Dr. Eleanor James returned again, this time with a slightly larger team. Michael Thompson, adult male research assistant, approximately 30 years old in 1978, lanky build, close-cropped black hair, serious and detail-oriented, operating sonar devices and logging data, practical field wear, reserved, focused demeanor. Linda Cortez, adult female oceanographer, approximately 38 years old in 1978, focused analytical gaze, dark hair tucked into practical cap, slim build, practical field wear, carrying notebooks and sonar equipment, careful and methodical posture. Dr. Samuel Whitaker, adult male oceanographer, approximately 40 years old in 1978, tall and lean, short sandy brown hair, clean-shaven face, intense blue eyes, wearing waterproof overcoat and practical sea boots, methodical and observant demeanor. Their goal was to combine decades of observation with modern technology, mapping the trench and analyzing the responsive pulses. 2. Nighttime observations. During a foggy night in November, the team deployed multiple hydrophones along the trench. They noted pulses lasting 25 to 50 seconds, subtle electromagnetic fluctuations, occasional phosphorescent shimmer beneath the water, fleeting and faint. Dr. James remarked, "It's as if the cove itself is conducting a dialogue with us, testing our awareness without revealing itself." 3. Fisherman's perspective. Thomas Hale described the night as familiar yet strange. Deck vibration beneath boots synchronized with hydrophone readings. Electrical interference with navigational tools coincided with pulses. The cove seemed to respond differently to each vessel, almost selectively. Older fishermen whispered about nights when the ocean watched, leaving boats untouched, but leaving a lingering sense of presence. 5. The Trench Mapping Project. Dr. Whitaker introduced advanced mapping techniques. Sonar arrays triangulated pulse origins. Pulses appeared to move deliberately along the trench, covering several hundred meters. Their path suggested awareness of observer proximity, slowing or intensifying when the team moved. Linda Cortez observed, "This is no random natural process. Something beneath the shelf is cognizant of us. It adapts." 6. Subtle patterns. Over multiple nights, they found recurring patterns. Longer pulses correlated with stillness and observation. Shorter, intermittent pulses coincided with vessel movement. Seasonal variations persisted, with winter and early spring producing the most consistent signals. Michael Thompson noted in his log, "The cove's behavior is neither hostile nor passive, it's analytical. It responds according to its own rhythm." 7. Emotional impact on observers. Despite scientific detachment, observers reported unease, a feeling of being watched without threat, a profound awareness of human limitation relative to the ocean, occasional moments of awe when pulses coincided perfectly with fog movement and vessel position. Thomas Hale reflected, "I've been fishing here for decades, but I still feel small, like the ocean knows something I don't." 8. Early hypotheses. The team debated explanations. Geological hypothesis. Subsurface shifts and sediment movement could explain vibrations, but not directed responsive patterns. Biological hypothesis. An unknown massive marine organism might generate pulses, yet visual confirmation remained elusive. Intelligent presence hypothesis, suggesting sentience or semi-sentience capable of observing without interacting. Consensus remained elusive, but the last hypothesis gained traction among the observers. 9. A notable night, December 1978. During a calm winter night, multiple vessels were anchored along the trench. Pulses became synchronized across distances of several hundred meters. Hydrophones recorded subtle harmonic variations, suggesting communication or structured movement beneath the water. Dr. James wrote in her journal, "We are witnessing something that operates on a scale beyond our understanding. The cove itself seems alive." 10. Reflections. Episode 6 closes with reflection on human observation. Decades of study confirmed a persistent, adaptive presence. The cove's pulses responded selectively to human activity. Despite technological advancement, the phenomenon's true nature remained hidden, a silent intelligence beneath the waves. Blackwater Cove continued its quiet vigil. Observers, scientists, and fishermen alike were left to reconcile awe, uncertainty, and respect for an ocean that moved with conscious rhythm, yet revealed no face.
Echoes beneath the surface. By the early 1980s, Blackwater Cove had become an almost sacred ground for those who observed its subtle yet insistent pulses. Over the decades, the cove had been studied, measured, and mapped, yet its behavior remained unpredictable. Each observer knew that the ocean held a consciousness of its own, responding selectively to human presence. Morning Vigil. Thomas Hale, adult male fisherman, approximately 55 years old in 1982, weathered face shaped by decades at sea, short dark brown hair slightly receding at temples, light stubble beard, deep-set gray eyes, calm, steady expression, broad shoulders, thick wool navy peacoat, heavy canvas trousers, rubber deck boots, rough calloused hands, disciplined upright posture, quiet observant demeanor. He stood on the pier at dawn, boots crunching against frost-covered planks. The water shimmered faintly in the low morning light, and a light fog clung to the shoreline. He had spent decades at sea, but the cove still commanded awe and subtle fear. The returning research team. Dr. Eleanor James, adult female oceanographer, approximately 42 years old in 1982, intelligent, meticulous, short brown hair tucked under a wide-brimmed hat, windbreaker and waterproof trousers, carrying notebooks and early portable recording devices, observant, analytical expression, confident yet careful posture. They planned a series of synchronized nighttime observations, deploying multiple hydrophones along the trench to detect even the faintest patterns. Nightfall on the cove. As darkness descended, the team observed the water's surface. Fog thickened along the horizon, obscuring distant vessels. Deck vibration beneath boots mirrored faint sonar pulses. Occasional phosphorescent glimmers reflected in the water, fleeting yet precise. Dr. James whispered to the team, "We are no longer just observers. We are participants in its rhythm. Everything we do is registered." Historical comparisons. Michael Thompson cross-referenced decades of logs from Thomas Hale and other fishermen. Consistent pulse timings occurred in winter and early spring. Seasonal variations suggested a complex repeating pattern, yet the origin remained elusive. Pulses appeared reactive, changing intensity and frequency depending on vessel movement and observer proximity. Linda Cortez noted, "It's as if the cove knows we are watching,
The rhythm changes according to our attention. Unexpected anomalies. On the third night of observation, a low hum lasted nearly a minute beneath the hull of one vessel. Hydrophones recorded harmonic overtones never documented before. Slight luminescence appeared in swirling patterns, faint but structured. Thomas Hale described it. "I've never seen the ocean behave like this. It's alive, but on its own terms." Emotional and cognitive responses. Observers recorded emotional reactions in their journals. Awe at the precision of the pulses. Anxiety from the subtle suggestion of being monitored. Heightened awareness of human insignificance in comparison to the cove's intelligent presence. Even after decades, the experience was profoundly humbling, blending science with something almost spiritual. Mapping behavior. Dr. Eleanor James implemented advanced triangulation techniques. Multiple hydrophones allowed mapping of the pulse's origin points. Pulses moved along the trench in predictable yet adaptive paths, avoiding obstacles and responding to observer movement. The pattern resembled a scanning or monitoring behavior, confirming that the phenomenon was not random. Linda Cortez observed, "Every pulse is deliberate. It respects our boundaries but registers our presence." Debate among scientists. By 1983, the team debated geological hypothesis, subsurface currents or tectonic shifts, insufficient to explain harmonic structure. Biological hypothesis, unknown large marine species, but visual confirmation lacking. Intelligent presence hypothesis, semi-sentient or intelligent entity monitoring human activity, gaining credibility among the team. Even decades of observation did not yield certainty, but the idea of an aware oceanic presence became increasingly accepted. Night observations intensify. Observers noted that simultaneous presence of multiple vessels triggered synchronized pulse responses. Variations in pulse duration and harmonic overtones suggested communication or structured monitoring. Subtle light flashes occasionally appeared, seeming to mirror the pulses. Michael Thompson remarked, "It's not hostile, but it's aware. We are never outside of its awareness." Reflection. Episode 7 concludes with a meditation. The ocean's rhythm was persistent, selective, and deliberate. Blackwater Cove remained a laboratory without walls, where human curiosity encountered a subtle intelligence. Despite technology, the cove's presence remained elusive, observed but never fully understood. Thomas Hale whispered quietly as he gazed across the water, "It watches, and we are lucky to witness it." The silent currents beneath the surface of Blackwater Cove continued their quiet, inscrutable vigil.
The pattern that watches back. By 1984, Blackwater Cove had changed, or perhaps it had simply revealed more of itself. For nearly 5 decades, fishermen, researchers, and quiet observers had documented its subtle pulses. What began as unexplained deck vibrations and harmonic echoes had evolved into something far more structured. The phenomenon no longer felt like random geology. It felt responsive, not aggressive, not benevolent, but attentive. 1. A winter return. Winter arrived early that year. Thomas Hale, adult male fisherman, approximately 57 years old in 1984, weathered face shaped by decades at sea, short dark brown hair now more visibly graying at the temples, light stubble beard, deep-set gray eyes, calm, steady expression with faint lines of fatigue, broad shoulders slightly stooped from years of labor, thick wool navy peacoat, heavy canvas trousers, rubber deck boots, rough calloused hands, disciplined upright posture,
quiet, observant demeanor, stood once again at the edge of the pier before dawn. The fog was heavier than usual. The water was unusually still. He had learned not to fear stillness. Stillness meant anticipation. 2. Expanded monitoring. Dr. Eleanor James, adult female oceanographer, approximately 44 years old in 1984, intelligent and composed, short brown hair tucked neatly beneath a weather-resistant field cap, windbreaker layered over thermal clothing, waterproof trousers, carrying updated analog to digital hybrid recording equipment, observant analytical expression, confident but cautious posture. The team installed a triangulated hydrophone grid along the trench, the most precise configuration ever attempted at the cove. The team installed a triangulated hydrophone grid along the trench, the most precise configuration ever attempted at the cove. At 11:42 p.m., the first synchronized pulse occurred. It registered across all hydrophones simultaneously. Not delayed, not scattered, simultaneous. Bobby Ellis stared at the waveform display. It adjusted, he said quietly. It accounted for the grid. The implication was unsettling. The pulses were no longer simply reacting to proximity. They were adapting to instrumentation. 3. The harmonic shift. Over the next week, 3 unusual behaviors were documented. Harmonic layering, a secondary overtone riding beneath the primary low-frequency pulse. Directional shift, pulses originating not only from the trench center, but traveling along its edges. Pause behavior, brief silence whenever multiple vessels clustered too closely. Linda Cortez recorded in her journal, "It pauses when we crowd it. That suggests boundary awareness." No one dismissed her comment. 5. Civilian witnesses. Word had spread quietly among locals. On one cold evening, 2 civilian fishermen reported unusual synchronized ripples beneath their hulls. Daniel Mercer, adult male commercial fisherman, approximately 48 years old in 1984, heavy-set body, thick dark beard flecked with gray, weather-beaten skin, knitted cap pulled low, layered flannel and waterproof overalls, steady, cautious demeanor. And his deckhand, Ellie Carter, young adult deckhand, approximately 23 years old in 1984, slim, athletic build, light brown hair tousled by wind, clean-shaven face, alert, expressive eyes, wearing thick wool sweater under rubberized deck jacket, slightly anxious posture. Both described the same sensation, a slow oscillation beneath the boat, not violent, measured. The timing of their experience matched a hydrophone pulse precisely. 4. Light beneath the waterline. On February 17, 1984, at approximately 2:13 a.m., faint luminescence appeared beneath the waterline. Thomas Hale saw it first. Not bright, not flashing, a slow, traveling shimmer moving parallel to the trench. Dr. Eleanor James confirmed through instrumentation that a harmonic pulse preceded the light by exactly 1.8 seconds. Cause and effect, or coordinated behavior. 5. The boundary experiment. With cautious agreement, the team conducted a minimal disturbance test. 2 vessels approached the trench edge slowly, stopping at incremental distances. At 200 meters, no change. At 150 meters, minor harmonic shift. At 100 meters, full pause, complete silence. The ocean did not respond again until both vessels reversed course. Bobby Ellis whispered, "It enforced a perimeter." No one contradicted him. 6. Emotional undercurrent. Observers reported unusual psychological pattern during monitoring sessions.
heightened awareness, subtle sense of being evaluated, difficulty speaking loudly near the trench. Michael Thompson admitted privately, "It feels like standing inside someone else's field of vision." Scientific detachment was becoming harder to maintain. 7. Data synthesis. By late spring 1984, the compiled data revealed non-random rhythmic structures, adaptive response to instrument density, spatial boundary behavior, consistent harmonic ratios over time. Geological explanations grew increasingly implausible. Biological theories remained speculative. The possibility of a structured, distributed intelligence, not centralized, not visible, entered formal discussion. 10. The watching pattern. The final observation of Episode 8 occurred on a windless April dawn. The team stood silently on the pier. Thomas Hale watched the horizon. Dr. Eleanor James monitored a portable receiver. At exactly 6:03 a.m., a single low-frequency pulse traveled the length of the trench. It did not repeat. It did not layer. It simply passed beneath them, smooth, unhurried, indisputably deliberate. For several seconds afterwards, the water remained perfectly still. Then the fog lifted slightly, not dramatically, just enough to reveal the outline of the trench current beneath the surface. Linda Cortez closed her notebook and said quietly, "It's not hiding, it's choosing to be noticed." No one spoke after that, because for the first time in nearly 50 years of documentation, the pattern no longer felt passive, it felt reciprocal. The ocean at Blackwater Cove did not merely respond, it acknowledged. And in that acknowledgement, the boundary between observer and observed had subtly shifted. The watching pattern was now watching back.
The quiet threshold. By 1985, Blackwater Cove was no longer simply a research location. It had become a boundary. Not a line drawn on a map, not a nautical exclusion zone, a threshold. Those who worked there no longer described the pulses as anomalies, they described them as responses, and responses imply presence. 1. A shift in tone. Spring arrived cold and windless. Thomas Hale, adult male fisherman, approximately 58 years old in 1985, weathered face marked by deeper lines from decades at sea, short dark brown hair now predominantly gray at the temples, light stubble beard, deep-set gray eyes reflecting quiet endurance, calm, steady expression with thoughtful restraint, broad shoulders slightly stooped from years of labor, thick wool navy peacoat layered over thermal sweater, heavy canvas trousers, rubber deck boots, rough calloused hands, disciplined upright posture despite fatigue, quiet observant demeanor, stood at the pier before sunrise. The water felt heavier, not rough, not active, just dense. He later described it as like the ocean was holding its breath. 2. Formal recognition. Dr. Eleanor James, adult female oceanographer, approximately 45 years old in 1985, intelligent and composed, short brown hair neatly tucked beneath structured field cap, weatherproof windbreaker over layered clothing, waterproof trousers, carrying refined monitoring instruments with organized precision. Observant, analytical expression, confident but visibly contemplative posture. Had submitted a confidential paper to a federal marine research board. The language was cautious. She avoided the word intelligence. Instead, she wrote, adaptive structured environmental response phenomenon. But internally, the team had begun using a simpler phrase, the watch. 3. Consolidated team. Present that year.
Michael Thompson, adult male research assistant, approximately 37 years old in 1985, lanky build, close-cropped black hair slightly thinning, serious focused expression, practical layered maritime field jacket, disciplined posture, steady hangs while operating sonar equipment, reserved demeanor. Linda Cortez, adult female oceanographer, approximately 45 years old in 1985, focused analytical gaze, dark hair tucked beneath insulated cap, slim build, layered field wear suitable for cold coastal mornings, carrying structured logbooks and calibration tools, careful, methodical posture. Robert Bobby Ellis, adult male acoustic engineer, approximately 33 years old in 1985, medium build, short sandy blonde hair, clean-shaven face, sharp, attentive blue eyes, insulated maritime jacket with tool pockets, holding advanced spectrum analyzer device, thoughtful yet increasingly unsettled demeanor. Daniel Mercer, adult male commercial fisherman, approximately 49 years old in 1985, heavy-set build, thick dark beard streaked more prominently with gray, weather-beaten skin, knitted cap, layered flannel shirt and waterproof overalls, steady, cautious demeanor. Eli Carter, young adult male deckhand, approximately 24 years old in 1985, slim athletic build, light brown wind-tossed hair, clean-shaven face, thick wool deck jacket beneath rubberized deck sweater, posture alert but visibly uneasy. 4. The long silence. In March 1985, something unprecedented occurred. For 14 consecutive days, no pulses, no harmonic layering, no boundary pauses, nothing. Hydrophones recorded only natural current noise. Michael Thompson recalibrated equipment 3 times. Linda Cortez rechecked trench positioning markers. Bobby Ellis ran independent spectrum sweeps. Everything was functioning. The ocean was silent. 5. Psychological drift. The silence unsettled the team more than activity ever had. Thomas Hale described difficulty sleeping. Dr. Eleanor James admitted to a persistent feeling of anticipation. Even Daniel Mercer avoided the trench entirely during that period. Eli Carter confessed quietly, "When it's active, at least we know it's there." The absence felt like withdrawal or evaluation. 6. The return pulse. On the 15th night at 2:47 a.m., a single pulse, low frequency, clean waveform, no harmonic overlay. It traveled from north to south along the trench in a continuous sweep. The hydrophone grid captured it perfectly. Bobby Ellis compared it to earlier data. The frequency ratio matched almost exactly the dawn pulse recorded in April 1984. Not random, patterned, recurring. 7. The threshold event. The following week, the team attempted a synchronized 3-vessel formation near the trench edge, a controlled density test. At 120 meters, subtle harmonic distortion. At 110 meters, layered overtones. At 105 meters, a rapid double pulse, something never recorded before. Then immediate silence. The vessels retreated. Within seconds, the primary pulse resumed, steady, unlayered. Linda Cortez wrote in her log, "The threshold is narrowing." 8. Civilian confirmation. 2 unrelated fishing crews reported unusual compass fluctuations while passing near the trench. No magnetic storm activity was recorded that day. Daniel Mercer confirmed minor steering resistance at the same coordinates. Hydrophone logs showed pulse activity during those exact minutes. The overlap was undeniable. 9. Data convergence. By late summer 1985, compiled analysis showed recurring seasonal pulses, density-triggered boundary enforcement, harmonic complexity scaling with vessel proximity, silence periods preceding major pulse events. Dr. Eleanor James privately recorded an audio memo. "We are not measuring randomness, we are measuring restraint." 10. Thomas Hale's realization. One fog-heavy morning, Thomas Hale stood alone again at the pier. He watched the water's surface for nearly an hour. No visible ripple, no audible vibration, yet he felt it. Not movement, not sound, presence. After decades at sea, he had learned the difference between imagination and intuition. This was neither. It was familiarity. He finally spoke aloud, softly. "We crossed something." He did not mean physically. He meant observationally. For 50 years, humans had watched Blackwater Cove. Now the pattern had refined itself, adjusted itself, measured itself against them. The threshold was no longer distance measured in meters. It was awareness measured in attention. 11. Closing reflection. Episode 9 does not end with spectacle. It ends with quiet recognition. Blackwater Cove in 1985 was calm on the surface. Fishermen worked, researchers logged, fog drifted. But beneath the trench, a structured rhythm continued, selective, adaptive, deliberate. The watch was not escalating, it was calibrating, and calibration suggests patience. The threshold had been approached, not crossed in violence, not crossed in revelation, simply acknowledged. And sometimes, acknowledgement is the most significant shift of all. The line between. By 1986, Blackwater Cove had become something quieter than mystery. It had become relationship. Not friendship, not conflict, but sustained awareness. For over 50 years, observers had measured pulses, mapped harmonics, and debated hypotheses. The data filled shelves. The journals thickened with interpretation. Yet none of it answered the simplest question. Was the cove reacting or choosing? 1. The final research season. Dr. Eleanor James, adult female oceanographer, approximately 46 years old in 1986, intelligent and composed, short brown hair now showing subtle strands of gray, tucked beneath structured coastal field cap, weatherproof windbreaker layered over thermal clothing, waterproof trousers, carrying carefully maintained monitoring instruments, observant, analytical expression softened by years of experience, confident yet reflective posture, had announced that 1986 would likely be the final full-scale monitoring season. Funding was declining. Interest had shifted elsewhere. Technology was moving towards satellites and offshore automation. Blackwater Cove remained analog and personal. 2. A changed Thomas Hale. Thomas Hale, adult male fisherman, approximately 59 years old in 1986, weathered face deeply lined from decades at sea, short dark brown hair now mostly gray at the temples and crown, light stubble beard, deep-set gray eyes reflecting calm acceptance, broad shoulders more noticeably stooped, thick wool navy peacoat layered against coastal wind, heavy canvas trousers, rubber deck boots worn from years of work, rough, calloused hands, disciplined yet slower posture, quiet, observant demeanor shaped by long familiarity with the ocean. No longer described the pulses as strange. He described them as seasonal, predictable, measured, like tides, but different. 3. Consolidated team presence. Present during this final season, Michael Thompson, adult male research assistant, approximately 38 years old in 1986, lanky build, close-cropped black hair thinning slightly, serious, focused expression matured by years of observation, practical, layered maritime field jacket, steady, confident posture while operating sonar equipment, reserved demeanor now edged with contemplation. Linda Cortez, adult female oceanographer, approximately 46 years old in 1986, focused, analytical gaze, dark hair streaked lightly with gray tucked beneath insulated cap, slim build, layered fieldwear suitable for cold coastal winds, carrying structured logbooks and calibrated instruments, careful, methodical posture softened by familiarity. Robert or Bobby Ellis, adult male acoustic engineer, approximately 34 years old in 1986, medium build, short sandy blonde hair, clean-shaven face, sharp, attentive blue eyes now more thoughtful than skeptical. Insulated maritime jacket with instrument tools secured in pockets, holding refined spectrum analyzer equipment, contemplative, steady demeanor. Daniel Mercer, adult male commercial fisherman, approximately 50 years old in 1986, heavy-set build, thick dark beard heavily streaked with gray, weather-beaten skin shaped by decades of wind and salt, knitted cap, layered flannel shirt and waterproof overalls, steady, cautious demeanor grounded in routine. Eli Carter, young adult male deckhand, approximately 25 years old in 1986, slim, athletic build, matured into stronger frame, light brown, wind-tossed hair, clean-shaven face, alert, expressive eyes tempered by experience, thick wool sweater beneath rubberized deck jacket, posture confident yet respectful toward the trench boundary. 4. The measured pulse. In early April 1986, the team recorded one of the clearest pulse sequences ever documented. Not louder, not stronger, cleaner. The waveform was precise, harmonics aligned in consistent ratios, directional travel traced perfectly along the trench contour.
Bobby Ellis compared it to data from 1951. The structure was nearly identical, 35 years apart. Consistency suggested continuity. Continuity suggested design. 5. The final boundary test. With unanimous agreement, the team conducted one final approach experiment. 3 vessels advanced toward the trench at controlled intervals. At 150 meters, primary pulse. At 120 meters, layered harmonic overlay. At 110 meters, brief silence. At 100 meters, a slow, deliberate double pulse. No escalation, no disturbance, just clarity. They did not proceed further, not out of fear, out of understanding. The line was not arbitrary, it was defined. 6. Civilian acceptance. Daniel Mercer reported no longer feeling uneasy near the trench. Eli Carter spoke of it as territory. Not hostile territory, just territory. Other fishing crews adjusted routes without complaint. No official restriction existed, yet behavior adapted naturally. A social perimeter had formed around an unseen presence. 7. Dr. Eleanor James's reflection. One evening, seated alone in the monitoring cabin, Dr. Eleanor James recorded her final audio log. Her voice was steady, measured. For decades, we searched for cause. Geological explanations proved insufficient. Biological theories lacked confirmation. The intelligence hypothesis remains unproven, yet the behavior is structured, adaptive, and restrained. If intelligence is defined by response and boundary, then Blackwater Cove demonstrates both. She paused before adding, "It does not intrude, it calibrates." 8. Thomas Hale's last watch. At dawn one quiet morning, Thomas Hale stood once more at the edge of the pier. Fog drifted low across still water. He had aged alongside the cove, his youth measured in tides, his middle years measured in pulses,
His later years measured in silence between them. A final low-frequency pulse passed beneath the dock. He did not flinch. He did not react. He simply nodded. Not in submission, in acknowledgement. 9. The line between. The research equipment would eventually be removed. Hydrophones lifted, cabin cleared, logs archived. But Blackwater Cove would remain, calm, measured, adaptive. The trench beneath its surface would continue its silent rhythm. The line between observer and observed had shifted permanently. Humans had arrived with instruments. The cove had responded with pattern. Neither conquered the other, neither withdrew. They adjusted, and in that adjustment, something rare had occurred. Mutual recognition without domination. 10. Final image. Years later, the pier would weather further. The lighthouse would continue rotating its beam through fog. Fishing boats would pass at a respectful distance. Children growing up in the town would hear stories, not of monsters, not of miracles, but of rhythm. Blackwater Cove did not reveal itself dramatically. It revealed itself patiently. The watching pattern remained, selective, quiet, deliberate. And somewhere beneath the surface of that fog-covered American shoreline, the pulse continued, not demanding attention, simply existing. The line between was no longer uncertain. It had been drawn in awareness, and awareness once shared does not disappear.